Speaking of South Australia, I want to go to this big battery. As I said at the outset, there's all sorts of triumphalism around today about the expansion of the big battery proves that South Australia's renewable energy experiment has worked. Well, clearly it failed. We saw the state go black 3 years ago, and as I've explained, close to $2 billion spent and in the pipeline to try and buttress that state's energy supplies. Let's go to an expert now, an energy economist. Alan Moran joins me live from Melbourne. First up, let's start with the good news here, Alan. The battery has worked. It's helped kick in and stabilise the grid in South Australia, and the way it's been able to do that so efficiently has actually saved taxpayers money or saved consumers money?
Well, not really. I think the issue is, as you suggested, we've had an atrocious policy, energy policy, for 15 years now, all governments, and we're continuing along that same track, which has seen the price of energy, the wholesale price of energy, rise by 2.5-fold. It's lifted us from being one of the cheapest energy producers, electricity producers in the world, to almost the dearest. Now, and that's basically because we've subsidised wind and solar, which has caused coal, which is far more efficient, far lower cost, and more reliable. It's forced coal out of the market and created the problems that you've already addressed.
Yeah, well, I want to go back to that supply issue in a moment, but given they were where they were, and you do have a lot of intermittent wind energy kicking in and out, the battery became, that sort of device becomes a necessity, doesn't it, to even out the system, to stabilise the grid?
Yeah, it doesn't add anything to capacity. It as you say, it stabilises the grid, which is made unstable by the inherent instability of wind and solar, which ebbs and flows when the wind blows and as the sun shines. So you basically need something to offset that. But what we've seen as a result of these batteries and various forms of they're called ancillary power, as a result of that, we've seen the costs in the market rise from about $50 million a year to $400 million a year. That has stabilised the market, and the batteries do work. No, there's no question about it. And Snowy 2 would work, which is a sort of a battery as well. But the costs of doing all this are colossal, and they are on top of the costs of actually substituting wind and solar for coal. They're on top of those costs because not only is the substitution more expensive, but is more unreliable, so you need something like batteries to actually iron out the ups and downs of the generation from wind and solar. So it's kind of a success in that sense, but it's a success built upon what is a government-created failure. Yeah, absolutely. It's a success to remediate a situation that should have never been created in the first place. And there's a couple of aspects I want to talk about on that, get your advice on. Firstly, let's stick with South Australia, though. What has been done to rescue the situation in South Australia, far more important than this battery to stabilise the grid, has been the additional supply. $1 billion spent on additional gas generation, and up to $1 billion or more planned for another interconnector into New South Wales. Exactly, and the interconnector basically into New South Wales does buttress the reliability of South Australia, which is highly unreliable at the moment, but also gives another venue for South Australian wind power to be sold in a market other than South Australia. You see, the wind power gets a $50 or so subsidy whenever it goes on. In other words, it not only gets what is the market price, but it gets this subsidy. So often, quite often in South Australia especially, the prices are negative. Well, that sounds pretty good, negative prices, but you and I know negative prices can't exist for long. And the only reason why they are negative is because the consumer is forced to give a subsidy to the wind, which can then bid in a negative and still make some money. So that's creating those negative prices in South Australia. Don't get me wrong, South Australia isn't cheap. It's still the dearest, on average, state in Australia, and it will remain so. but it does have these periods of negative prices, and he thinks, OK, if we can get another $1 billion interconnector with New South Wales, then we can actually flush out some of that negative pricing and make some more money on it.
Great. And
but the people who are paying are the taxpayers, ratepayers.
And they destabilise another state's system. But
Exactly.
Anyway, they've got all that extra gas generation in there. Close to $1 billion has been spent on that, government and private investment. So that means South Australia should not get blacked out again. But the other question with this battery investment is, as we see more and more wind and other intermittent generation go into Victoria and New South Wales, presumably you're going to need those batteries or something similar built into the grids in New South Wales and Victoria to help stabilise the systems there, right?
Exactly so, and indeed that's one of the rationales behind Snowy 2, which could cost $10 billion. It's up in the air how much it's going to cost, but basically the justification for turning the Snowy hydroelectric into a pumped storage facility is that we're going to see much more volatility in prices than we've seen in the past as a result of wind and solar increasing their shares, and therefore it will make money. So it will be a success, but it's a success only because we've created such a colossal failure that we need something to offset it, and so it's a success only in those relative terms, as is the case with the batteries in South Australia.
Yeah, spot on, Alan. Thanks so much for that analysis.
You're welcome.
Alan Moran there, who's an energy economist, explaining exactly, as I was saying at the top of the program, yeah, the battery works, it helps iron out the flat spots, but it's there to try and fix a completely disrupted grid, and it doesn't solve the supply problems. That's come from all the additional investment, emergency investment in gas generation.